Hello and welcome back to the Biochemistry for Health Sciences channel. Today we will discuss bicarbonate, the anion bicarbonate. So besides chloride, bicarbonate is another very important anion that is found in our body. So we are going to give you an overview of this anion. So bicarbonate is a test that is quite often ordered in the clinical setting. Typically, this is a test that is done in arterial blood. Most of the tests we discussed before were done either in serum plasma that was obtained from venous blood. Okay, but this one here is actually obtained from arterial blood, and so they are specialized clinicians who are trained to get the sample from the arterial blood vessel. And bicarbonate is what we call, is really part of the arterial blood gases, the ABG panel. So you can see this panel has other very important tests that are done by an instrument, including pH, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide or PCO2, partial pressure of oxygen, and of course bicarbonate and a few other tests that we'll talk about later when we talk about acid-base balance. So bicarbonate is a very important test for determining the acid-base balance. Okay, acid-base balance in a human being. And we'll talk about this in future videos. So this is the structure of bicarbonate. Basically, we write it as H. There's one hydrogen, one carbon, 3 oxygens, and there is a negative charge. So we usually write it as HCO3 minus, and of course in the clinical setting is simply written as HCO3. So a little bit about bicarbonate. To really understand bicarbonate, we really must look at this very, very important equation, and that is the gas carbon dioxide. It's not very soluble in water, but a little bit of it will dissolve in water. So this is a gas. Water is, of course, just a liquid. We just call it L, and gives you an acid, carbonic acid, H2CO3. Okay, carbonic acid can then break down to give you protons, H plus, and bicarbonate. So carbon dioxide in water can give you acid. Anything that gives off H plus is an acid. So carbon dioxide is actually a volatile acid. It's an acid indirectly, volatile acid, because it can produce protons. And volatile means just that it's a gas that we can get rid of through our lungs. As opposed to non-volatile acids like hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is not a gas. Sulfuric acid, that's not a gas. Or phosphoric acid. Okay, these are not gases. These are all non-volatile acids. Okay, so carbon dioxide is a volatile acid, and these ones are non-volatile acids. Okay, so let's see how this equation is used in the body. So let's begin with the production of carbon dioxide. And as we mentioned earlier, one of the most important functions of cells is to generate energy. We need to continuously generate energy because we do not store energy. So we need to generate it all the time. So fuel and oxygen is the best way to generate maximum amounts of energy. And one of the byproducts of this is that the carbon becomes carbon dioxide. CO2, most of this happens in a mitochondria. So CO2 is a very hydrophobic gas. It can cross the mitochondrial membrane, get into the cytoplasm, easily cross the plasma membrane, get into the interstitial fluid, and then get into blood vessels, cross all the membranes of the endothelial cells, okay, and get into the plasma. And in the plasma, some of the carbon dioxide dissolves in water to give you carbonic acid, okay, give you H2CO3. The rest of the carbon dioxide enters the red blood cell. Again, there are many red blood cells. So the CO2 enters the red blood cell, and that's we see the equation. Carbon dioxide reacts with water. This is usually very slow. But in the presence of an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase, this reaction goes real fast, okay, and you get carbonic acid, which then breaks down to give you H plus and bicarbonate. So let me get rid of some stuff here. So now we have our bicarbonate and our H plus. Our protons. Now this bicarbonate that is produced, okay, is exported out of the cell, and chloride is taken into the cell. Okay, this is the chloride shift that people refer to. Now the protons, so now is all this acid is going to combine with oxygenated hemoglobin. The oxygenated hemoglobin is going to change shape and lose its oxygen to become deoxygenated hemoglobin. And this oxygen now, again, a hydrophobic gas, travels through all the membranes and then eventually enters the muscle cell where it combines with myoglobin, the protein myoglobin, and eventually this oxygen is taken up by the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. Okay, so this is what happens at the tissues. Okay, so this is the reaction that we're talking about that happens at tissues, blood vessels of the tissues in red blood cells. So these red blood cells with the deoxyhemoglobin, so they've given off the oxygen to the tissues. Now when these red blood cells travel to the lungs, there the oxygen from the atmosphere will cross through all the membranes and eventually reach the red blood cell. And there the oxygen combines with the deoxyhemoglobin that was formed here. And now we get oxyhemoglobin and the protons are released. These protons are now released. These protons here combined with the hemoglobin here, the protons are released from the hemoglobin. So now these protons will combine with the bicarbonate, and the bicarbonate is taken into the red blood cell for exchange of chloride. So from the plasma, the bicarbonate is taken into the red blood cells. So these protons will combine with bicarbonate and the reaction will go in this direction, producing carbonic acid. And this carbonic acid will then break down to give you water and carbon dioxide. Okay, so water and carbon dioxide. Once again, this reaction is catalyzed by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, makes it go much faster. And this carbon dioxide is now released into the atmosphere. So in exchange for oxygen, we release carbon dioxide in the lungs. So once again, this reaction, this very important reaction happens. And so you can see this reaction is important for tissues, happens in red blood cells in tissues, and happens in red blood cells in the lungs. So this reaction here is not only important in red blood cells, but you can see it and it happens in many other different types of cells. And we'll talk about these specialized cells, these other types of specialized cells that uses this reaction. So in future videos, but for now, let's just look at an overview. Look at the ductal cells in the pancreas. We know one of the functions of these cells that line the ducts of the pancreas is to secrete bicarbonate. Okay, secrete bicarbonate. And you can see how that happens is the CO2 in your blood capillary is taken up by these cells, these pancreatic ductal cells. CO2 combines with water to form carbonic acid, catalyzed by CAB. And carbonic acid then breaks down to give you protons and bicarbonate. And this bicarbonate is transported out into the pancreatic juice. Okay, out into the pancreatic juice. So that's another example of this very important reaction that is used by pancreatic ductal cells. The reaction is also used by the stomach. There is specialized cells called parietal cells in the stomach that secrete hydrochloric acid. And you can see once again the reaction. Carbon dioxide plus water give you carbonic acid, and that breaks down to give you protons, which are then released into the gastric juice. Okay, and that's gives you the H plus in your stomach cavity, digestive cavity. And this bicarbonate that is formed is transported out by a transport protein out into the blood. And in exchange, chloride is brought in. And this chloride is also then transported into the gastric cavity. And H plus and Cl minus will give you your hydrochloric acid. And we know that's one of the specialized functions of the stomach, and that is to secrete HCl, which helps in the digestion of proteins and sterilizes food and so on. And we'll talk about the molecular basis of this in future videos. So besides red blood cells, pancreatic ductal cells, parietal cells, there is another specialized cell, and that's the osteoclast that is found in bone. This is one of the specialized cells in bone that also uses this reaction. So we can see here carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, which catalyzes the reaction to give you carbonic acid, which then breaks down to give you protons, acid plus bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is exchanged for chloride. So chloride enters and the bicarbonate is released. And this H plus is then transported out of the osteoclast and into the bone matrix, and it helps together with, you can see chloride that's taken in. Chloride is transported out, and so we get hydrochloric acid here. And this hydrochloric acid helps dissolve the bone. Okay, so one of the very important things that happens in bone is the modeling, bone modeling. We have to make sure not only we can make the bone, but the bone has to have the right shape. So this osteoclast also use this carbonic anhydrase reaction to carry out its specialized function. So later on in future videos, we are going to talk about one of the very, very important concepts in medicine, and that's acid-base balance. Acid-base balance, because a lot of tests that are based on this concept are very critical tests. They are very, very important tests, such as pH, PCO2, okay, and so on. PO2, acid-base balance. And the acid-base balance is also uses this very important equation, because the carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer is one of the most important buffering systems in the human body. And you probably remember what a buffer is from your basic chemistry. A buffer is a solution that resists changes in pH. Okay, so if, for example, if you produce a lot of acid in your body, if you don't have a buffer, your pH will drop from 7 to 0.4 downwards in the presence of acid. And if you don't have a buffer, then if you drank some bicarbonate solution or produce some alkali, then your pH will go up. Okay, we don't want that to happen because humans can only live between, we'll have to maintain, not live, but we'll have to maintain their pH as close as possible to 7.4. Otherwise, if your pH drops or goes too high, we will suffer from all kinds of symptoms that may be even fatal. Okay, so it's very important to do this buffering, and the bicarbonate carbonic acid, we'll look at it later, is a very important buffer. For now, enough to say that this part of the equation is taken care of by your lungs, that is your PCO2, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, while your bicarbonate, which is in millimolar, so this PCO2 is roughly around 40 millimeters mercury, and this is roughly about 24 millimolar, and that's taken care of by the lungs. Okay, so in a normal person, as long as this number is around 40, this is around 24, we will get a pH of 7.4. And if these values change, then our pH will also change. Okay, so we'll talk about this under acid-base balance in future videos. Very, very important concept. Okay, so once again, bicarbonate, okay, and a very important anion besides chloride. Anion just means negatively charged ion. Okay, so my assistant Quirly just reminded me that I misspoke and said bicarbonate is taken care of by the lungs. So once again, carbon dioxide levels in your body is controlled by the lungs, while bicarbonate levels in your blood is controlled by the kidneys. Okay, so lungs for carbon dioxide, kidneys for bicarbonate, and this is something we'll talk about in future videos. Thank you, Cooley, for that catching the error. We hope you enjoyed this video. Again, this is simply an overview of the bicarbonate anion. We will hopefully see you in the next video.